Welcome, everyone, to the BikePortland podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Maz. My guest today is Shawn Granton, artist, comic book creator, photographer, ride leader, ride organizer, bike tour, low-car Portlander, and author, and a Zinester, and all sorts of other things. And that is part of why it is way late for me to have you here in the shed, given how much cool stuff you do around the bike scene in Portland. So, Shawn, welcome in.
Thank you. And I don't hold it against you, so don't.
How about the origin story? How did you get to Portland and when?
So I got to Portland in April of 2001. I am originally from the East Coast, Connecticut, to be exact, the poorer part for anybody that has any preconceived notions about the state of Connecticut. But moved to the West Coast, first to the Bay Area in June of 2000, and that was the height of .com boom #1, and it was probably one of the worst times to try to move to. I mean, I understand that like moving to the Bay Area is never easy, but it was very hard, especially for somebody that like didn't have a lot of local knowledge and resources. So I sort of floundered for a few months and then decided to move up here because I had a few friends up here. And I think one of the things that was great about landing here in Portland is, especially in the year 2001, if you were not from this area or the greater Northwest, and you try to like the notion of Portland didn't exist yet. Like nobody knew what Portland was. I mean, most people couldn't find it on a map, like outside of, the West Coast. And I would talk to people and say that I'm, living in Portland now, and they'd be asking me about the Space Needle. And it's like, that's Seattle. Like,
wow.
So, especially like East Coast people. But in general, like Portland just seemed like a blank page. And, but the thing is I'm saying it like in my perception, but I know that like there was a lot going on and there's a lot of history, and that's been the fun of Urban Adventure League, is trying to explore like what makes Portland Portland. And there was because there was like less of a preconceived notion about what Portland was. Probably was more open to finding things out versus like moving to a place like San Francisco or LA or even Seattle, where it's like by the year of 2000, like people had a really good picture of what LA was supposed to be. San Francisco and Seattle being the big thing in the 90s, like people sort of had an idea about that too. Like Portland was just a sort of unknown.
And you arrived here as an artist, I'm assuming even back then. So you had a bag full of pens and paper and a very clean slate to start to create and sort of define. You've called yourself like an urban historian to some degree. One of the rides that I first got to know you through was the Dead Freeways Ride, which you still do a lot. Some of the rides you still do. The Dead Freeways Ride is really cool, where you sort of have mapped out the historical significance in place and in sort of narrative, what the freeways we've fought in town, like where the old ramps would have been and how they would have impacted the city. So tell me about when you first got here, though. Like, did you dive right into being part of this Zinester's Guide to Portland, which is one thing that I know your name is on as a collaborator, and that's been still for sale, and it's 6th printing now. So what was it like back then? What were you like coming into Portland in 1995, 2000, something like that?
2001,
sorry. Yeah.
I knew from being in the zine community that Portland had at least I knew that there was like a zine scene here, and the big thing was the Independent Publishing Resource Center, the IPRC.
Right.
I remember going there like probably the first day that I moved to town, and they had a potluck. So I went there, looked at the space, got to know a few people, and then just started going there, became a member, doing a lot of stuff, became a volunteer/staff member. I was on the staff of the IPRC from 2001 to probably like 2012. 2012, a good decade of just being involved in that. And then from that, I also found out about the Portland Zine Symposium, which is still going on. So basically Portland's annual zine community gathering, bringing zinesters from all over. And that's where the Zinester's Guide got its start, because I was not involved in that first zine symposium. I was pretty new to town, and I was I think I was working a lot because I was really broke and, just found myself a really mediocre job that and I didn't really know that many people, but I knew that it was going on. I went to it, and I knew that they created the Zinester's Guide as sort of just a quick guide to give to people coming to the zine symposium, especially Portland 2001, the internet existed, but we didn't have smartphones. And, I think I was mentioning to you, the era where like you're either going to a library or a internet cafe and spending like $6 for an hour of like, looking at your Hotmail email address and, Yahoo search and stuff like that. So having a little guide that you could put in a pocket was really useful. And it was from the angle of low cost stuff to do, free things to do, cool places to go, a lot of vegan stuff because a lot of zinesters were and are vegan. So it was, helpful to like know what restaurants that you can go to, and also, places to sell zines, like Reading Frenzy, which unfortunately is no longer with us, but, Chloe's had quite the legacy in Portland, even before she was a commissioner, so like as being the owner of Portland's preeminent zine store. So that was coming in 2001, just trying to find my way around town. We ended up in a really crappy apartment on Southeast 18th and Morrison, right near Colonel Summers Park. And I spent the 2 years there. And at first, I was just riding the bus a lot, walking around. And then sometime that summer, I think I got some birthday money. I went down to City Bikes, the City Bikes Annex, and got a giant Rincon mountain bike, $150 City Bike special, and rode that thing around for like 5 years until I basically rode that into the ground. That was like my first Portland bike, and nothing special. Like my 2025 like bike snobby self, like when I like see old photos of the bike, I'm like, oh my God, I rode that thing for like 5 years, but it got the job done, and I had a lot of fun and learned a lot about the city.
And now, so Bike Summer, which is now known as Pedal Palooza, and on Bike Summer again, that started in 2002. So you kind of came to Portland right at the start of this real like flowering of bicycle culture and stuff.
Bicycle culture, zine culture, music scene was going on, So I remember Bike Summer because I was riding my bike then. I wasn't really that involved with like the bike community yet. I went on one critical mass ride, and Portland always sort of had a tenuous history with critical mass. I mean, you've had an experience with that. I went to one. It was sort of fun and sort of stressful and sort of chaotic, and so that was about as much as I knew about like quote bike fun unquote. And people, if you say like critical mass bike fun, like some people will get offended. Like, but it's But a lot of like what became Bike Summer and the bike community we know now was born out of Portland's critical mass, when people were saying like, what about the other things we can do that weren't just the last ride of the month and, a protest type of ride. And Bike Summer, from what I remember, was a traveling fair. I think it started in San Francisco because, of course. And I think that was also for them, like, because they were the originators of critical mass. So that was, they had that first idea. I think it went to Chicago in 2000. Like it was 99 was the first one. 2001 was Vancouver, BC. And then we were 2002. And it was sort of like, almost like the Olympics in the sense of like, they figured out who would be the next, and like there would be like a representative for the next city to get the flag and stuff like that. And so Bike Summer, when it was started, was 1 month. It was August. I saw it like City Bikes or somewhere, like, People's Co-op or something like that. Like, it was a newsprint calendar, and I'm like, oh, this looks cool. Let me try to do some of that stuff. And I tried to do some of that stuff. It was that calendar, like looking back, I think it was probably like 60 events over a month span. And a lot of the stuff happened on weekends, and I was working on weekends a lot back in that era. And so I didn't get to do as many rides as I hoped. I did go to a few, there was like a few workshops, so I went to some of those, but I did go to at least a few things, got to, see a few people, and, from the limited exposure I had that year, it was fun. And
so you didn't come here as a bike person though, and you saw this thing happening of Bike Summer. Like, what did you think? How did that make you feel seeing that? Were you like, whoa, Portland's got a cool bike scene here? Like, how did you get attached to that? Yeah,
I wasn't like quote a bike person before I moved to Portland. Where I grew up in suburban Connecticut, I rode my bike as a kid, but it wasn't unless you like lived in certain areas or were sort of like Eugene Sloan levels of like bike hardiness, like you weren't probably gonna like bike commute. And so when I moved to the Bay Area, like I had that idea, like especially since I've been involved in zine culture since the mid 90s, and there was like a lot of talk about bicycles and like mentionings of critical mass and like bike commuting. I was like, oh, I'm gonna try that. I'm moving to the Bay Area. I mean, this will be a great place to be a bike commuter. And I did find like another like whatever mountain bike that somebody sold me for cheap, and it didn't really take off in the Bay Area because what happened was I ended up living in Oakland, which I enjoyed living in Oakland, but I was working in the city in San Francisco, and that was the era I think that Bart was like, no bikes during the commute hours and this and that. So like I had the bike, but I really didn't use it to go to work because I worked basically in the outside the financial district in San Francisco. So moved to Portland, and I had like the idea of more like, all right, when I get the money, like when I figure out money, I'm going to get a bike and I'm going to like bike commute and like really stick to it. So I was here and I was trying to like, do this bike stuff, and I went on like one critical mass, and, I wanted to, but I think like in that era, like it wasn't really a known quantity, like, because it didn't really exist yet. Like this idea of bike fun that we have in Portland, like
the idea of like some kind of unified bike culture that you could put your hands around.
Yeah,
and,
it
was just starting. It was maybe just starting to formulate in a more of an organized way.
Yeah, like
partly because Bike Summer, really, right?
And I mean, and just in general, because it's like, Portland was probably like a lot of other places. There were like certain communities and tribes and whatever you want to call it. Like, there was definitely like bike messengers, and they were over here.
Yeah.
And like, you'd sort of like see them riding around and like, maybe wave, and they'd maybe grunt to you if you were lucky. And then like, there's probably people doing some more like, mountain biking and road stuff.
Like fast rides.
And that was like, that happens everywhere. But like that sort of like, hey, we're just, like whatever people riding whatever bikes, and we're going to do things, and we're not really concerned about speed or toughness and stuff like that. And so the whole like idea of Bike Summer, when I encountered it, was like, wow, this is interesting. It's sort of like, and it went with the type of like vibe that I was going with, like stuff like with zines and like sort of a DIY culture of like, hey, you want to do something, let's just do it and like put it out there in the world and see, are people going to show up? Maybe people show up, and people show up, like we can build something off of this, or like, let's just do this and not worry about money or professionalism or any of that type of stuff. Let's just create something and see where it goes from there.
Yeah. So you were saying kind of the formulation of this idea that you could just informally get some people together and then connect and go on a ride. I was looking at some of your early blog posts, and I came across something on your website about the creation of the Midnight Mystery Ride.
Yeah.
And how it seems to me that the kind of art that you wanted to make and the things you wanted to do with it, like make a sticker for something that doesn't exist yet, but just like kind of looks cool. And like, it's almost like you're seeding a community, and then some things grow around it. And I think the story of the Midnight Mystery Ride and how that formed is a good illustration of that. So do you mind sharing kind of that story?
So I think like it was probably about 2002, and I was into the idea also of like street art, not like I wasn't going to do graffiti or anything like that, but like just sort of like how people can interact with the urban environment and, create things. And, it's like one of the things I love, like even just riding around today, it's like, oh yeah, that cool like sign that somebody just stuck on the utility pole over here, that it's still there. All right. Nobody's taken it down yet. Like, and it's like a lot of that stuff, not all of it, but definitely a lot of it, like at least like puts a smile on my face. Like, oh, this is like that fun little thing that somebody did. And so my idea was just to like maybe create a few different like pseudo organizations. And I sort of like love that concept back then of just create a sticker, with a name of something and just slap it on something and see what happens. And I created this one sticker that said Midnight Bicycle League.
And you loved riding at night, you would say, like, right? Like something about having the headlamp at night was kind of cool.
And I mean, it was like, I did that a lot, like during that era of just like sort of like, especially living in that apartment, like if it got too hot, or the guys working at the telephone company across the street were just getting too loud out there, because they would like come out and like have like multiple smoke breaks, and they would just like talk loud and cat call people and stuff like that. And I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna get out and like, let me go on a bike ride. Let me ride down by the train tracks, watch some trains go by, like, like see the city at night type of thing. And it's also like I was like 27, so I didn't have as many responsibilities in the world. So it was just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like go ride around. And so I just like had like, oh, this is like such a great feeling. Like, why don't I create this Midnight Bicycle League, but I'm not doing really anything for it other than like
slapping stickers around. Yeah.
I just like, did a black and white design, got sticker guy or whoever to, made like a couple hundred. And then I think it was Aileen Crotty, saw the sticker, and like, she figured out that it was me that did it. She got in touch with me, and she's like, well, I have this idea of doing a night ride, like a midnight ride, and we do it monthly, and it, turns out like the second Friday of the month, and meet up somewhere and then ride to mystery spots and have fun, like have a little party or whatever you want, and just sort of explore the city at night and show people things that they might not know existed. And she's like, is it okay if I did that? I'm like, yeah, sure, that sounds cool. And I think that was February of 2003 was the first midnight mystery ride.
And it's still happening.
And it's still happening, yeah. Just
last Friday of the month?
No, second Friday.
Second Friday of the month, yeah.
I mean, I saw an email last week that it happened, and
so cool.
Yeah, and I mean, I went to a lot of them during like the early era. Like,
yeah.
Now that I'm an old man, like,
I mean, you had to know that Portland was a good fit for Shawn Granton if a random sticker that you created out of thin air for something you just thought was fun to do got noticed by another person who was so excited about it they wanted to. It like satisfied their vision of a ride that then has lasted over 20 years.
Over 20 years.
That's so cool, and it's right up your alley because it's. I mean, the Midnight Mystery Ride, the whole idea is like, go to a mystery location. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that you like is kind of like finding those nooks and crannies. Whether you're traveling around the globe or even in Portland, like finding cool places is kind of like, that's your specialty.
Yeah. And I mean, I think like finding the cool stuff and sharing the cool stuff. And also, I know that it's not everybody's thing. Like some people, when they do bike rides, they want to know exactly where they're going. They want routes, they want cue sheets or something. And many of my rides are not that way because I like to sort of unveil the mystery as it occurs. Like, so the people, rather than like give it all out and then just do the ride, is like, oh, look, here we are. And like this thing you might not have known about.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned not just finding cool spots, but also sharing them. So you realize, Shawn, that you are kind of like one of the, like, you're what they call now an influencer online, right? Boy. You're an urban influencer without necessarily being all about clicks and follows. Yes. You're like, hey, follow me on your bike instead of online.
I mean, I don't mind people following me online, but like,
of course.
I don't like do anything. I mean, I'm pretty low maintenance now. Like when it comes to Instagram, I mean, I do occasionally post, and I do look at it probably more than I care to admit sometimes.
So help people that help. What do you think about like the change in how some of these rides and how the local bike culture sort of evolves now with this amazing ability to be networked among everyone online through social media?
Yeah,
I think partly you'd be happy that it's easy to connect and so many more people can, let's say, find out about one of your rides. But what do you think about that? I mean, because you were here doing this literally like the old-fashioned way.
Yeah,
putting up posters. Like a lot of your art is actually event posters, right? So folks don't know, a lot of the cool stuff Shawn does is like, think of concert posters, concert flyers or whatever. Shawn's done so many really cool bike event posters that you've probably seen around town. Actually, I got one up right here. I swapped it for you, but it's always been up. It was on the top outside of our shot, so now it's actually down a little bit. But
then none of you ironically have you got a bunch of Pedalpalooza posters, but
did you do one of those?
I've done 4 of them.
You've done 4? How do I not have any?
I don't
of yours?
know. How do you have?
That is weird.
Know. Yeah.
Okay, but I was saying, like that. I would love to hear what you think about just. You've been in an era that's so different from when you started to what it is now, and like, if people looked at your bike stable, which by the way, you can see Shawn's current bikes on his website, which are all really interesting bikes. If people look at that, they look at your sort of winter clothing tips, that you love wool, and they might be like, oh, this guy's kind of a retro kind of guy.
Yeah.
But so what's that like to be in that space in a world of media and marketing and art to some degree and bike culture that's changed so much?
All right. Well, I'm going to break this down a little bit because you asked quite a bit.
Sorry.
All that. So like getting back to like how doing rides and like especially ride promotion and communication has changed in this modern era. So my first ride was in 2004, and it's going back to the history of Bike Summer. So we had the Bike Summer in 2002, and then a bunch of locals like Aileen and a few other people. I mean, I'm spacing names right now. They decided they're going to create their own thing. Instead of waiting for Bike Summer to come back in 10 years or whatever, or never, that they would do a local version. And the first one was called Mini Bike Summer, and that one was also more in conjunction with Zoo Bomb, because Zoo Bomb also started in 2002, like right around the same time as Bike Summer. So that was also something that started then. And that was the calendar was much smaller. It was like 2.5 weeks. Pedalpalooza, the official name, didn't come till 2004, and that was the first year I started to do lead bike rides, when I first, like, after like sort of cataloging a bunch of interesting things in my head. That was like the first time that I like got confident enough to be like, okay, I'm going to lead a bicycle ride, because it's definitely like, you know, it's a daunting task, especially like if you've never done it before. Like, what exactly is leading a bicycle ride like? Like, what do I have to do and stuff like that? And I mean,
well, it can be many things. Yours happen to be they have detail. It's almost like you go through a presentation or a book, to some degree, with stops. Where
it's a PowerPoint with stops.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you know,
but some people just lead rides and play some music and then go to a park.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's just what I do.
Yeah.
And like Sunset Moonrise Ride, which I do not lead, I just cover for it. No, that's a little bit more the part.
Palm Tree Ride is one of the ones you do, right?
Yeah.
The wintertime Palm Tree Ride.
Yeah. So, but like Sunset Moonrise is more like a just sort of like we go to a spot and like hang out type of thing. So it's less structured. But like the other rides I do definitely have more of a structure of conveying information and stopping a lot and doing all that stuff. That was 2004 when I started that. And in that era, the shift calendar existed. So it was around then. And for those that don't know, the shift calendar is basically, it's an all year way of posting rides. Anybody can post a ride and have it there, and a bunch of people can see it. So it exists. It was an infancy then. There was the Shift email list, which still does exist. I mean, people do use it.
They do? I haven't seen any posts on that for so long. It used to be back when I was first year in 05, 06, 07. It was like super busy, I mean, lots of cool stuff being posted on there.
That era, like, I mean, the aughts definitely was like an era of like listservs. And I mean, it still is to some degree. The formula was post a ride on the Shift calendar, say something on the Shift list, and then flyer. And you know, in 2004, Instagram did not exist. Flickr just started, and that wasn't really social media as we knew it. I mean, I think Facebook was around, but most people didn't have this stuff. And also just the fact that, like, you know, smartphones didn't exist. Like, I mean, I guess BlackBerries did, but, like, I mean, in 2004, I didn't even have a cell phone. Like, so the thing was that you put that stuff out there, and you basically had to, like, hold to it. Like, you're like, I'm going to do a ride on Tuesday, February 27th at 6 p.m. Meet me here. It's like, you better be there, because it's like people just saw it on flyers, or like there was the whole thing with like, even if you promoted it like with some, you know, on a website, or like there would just be like, people don't check their email on the weekend. Like they only checked it while at work and stuff like that.
There's no edit button. Or
like that. So it's just, you had to like hold to it.
Yeah,
so
it's funny.
I mean, it was definitely, it really made you have to do the things you promised to do. Otherwise, and people probably, I mean, get mad at you if like they showed up to an event that didn't exist.
But people still showed up. You and other folks that were doing that really built something special, because people kept showing up, and now they're still showing up. So
they're still showing up, but it's like a lot easier.
It's a lot different, a lot easier.
You know, and it's like, you know, now people, like, with all the tools that we have, like, you know, you can like, all right, here's the route, download it from Ride with GPS, you know, and follow it on the track. Like, or you could just follow the tracker, like where I am. Like before, like it was just like, you know, like when the ride left, like,
good luck.
Like good luck trying to find it. Like,
it's like you can ask someone, "Did you see a bunch of blinking lights? Have you seen a bunch of people on bikes?" And depending on what day of Bike Summer, that might not help, because there's going to be multiple people on bikes riding around. Can I get back to your art for a second?
Sure.
And just ask you, like, how do you describe, you know, the kind of illustrations that you do? Like, what is this, just like your own? Obviously, it's your own style, but like, what was your inspiration? They all have a certain look and feel to them. Is there a way you describe your illustrations in your art?
I mean, it's always asking like the artist, like how to describe like what their art style is like, is always hard. I mean, I just like, I grew up reading comic books. I like classic pen and ink illustration. So things sort of came from there. Like, you know, comics, like first mainstream comics, and then underground and alternative comics. So, you know, it's like my illustration style, like sort of developed from like whoever I was like following. And then I think once I started doing a lot more posters, I would get like books from the library about like design, like especially like books about posters and stuff like that through the eras to sort of help me, visualize and create new images.
And I didn't even mention how you've done. I mean, comic illustration is your one thing you've had been a through line. You've always done comics, right? What are some of the comics people might be able to find or have seen?
Well, I mean, it's hard now because it's like everything's out of print. But I used to be published in Momentum magazine out of Vancouver.
That's right. Yeah.
So I had a thing with them for a while, and then Bicycle Times.
Two great magazines that are no longer allowed.
So I guess that's the through line is like if you like hire me to like do some comics for your magazine, then you're
like a fun back page. I remember that the one in the Momentum one was like in the back. It'd be just kind of like a nice parting note. One of your observations about some interaction. Some of them set in bike shops or just on the street or something like that.
And it's like it was fun because both magazines generally gave me a pretty wide berth of doing what I wanted to do. Like it wasn't that I was had to like, I mean, sometimes I would get requests like I think especially with Momentum with Amy Walker, she would like say like, what about this? And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll try to do something with that angle. I think Bicycle Times is basically just like, here's your like, 3-panel grid to work with and go for it.
I saw one panel that I just recently saw. It was really good. It was funny, and it was like winter ride clothing tips.
Yeah.
So those are some of them, just like single panel. But it's funny because you had you essentially or someone that looked like you, and then there was also like a dude in like Lycra and his clippy shoes or whatever, being really cold, and you kind of like said it wasn't like yes no clearly, but you were. The diagram little points you made for the guy in like the Lycra outfit were basically showing like, this is why this dude is so cold. Yeah. And you were sitting there. So since it's been pretty cold.
Yeah. And I think like.
You got to share some of the tips though too.
And I definitely got like some grumblings from like roadies like after that comic.
Oh, really?
Of course, like I think.
You've always had fun with the labels though, and how all the little segments of the bike culture love to put little labels on themselves or whatever.
I think that whole thing, like the whole roadie caricature that I created, like actually happened from, had a germ in another bike event that we used to have that Jonathan created called Bike Craft.
Oh boy,
yes,
yeah.
But I remember there was like a Bike Craft off of I forget what space it was. It was like off of Williams. Do you remember which year? It was like probably 2009.
Yeah,
2000.
where Portland Design Works was there, right?
Or they didn't.
Now it's like a fitness place.
Yeah, or something like
that.
that.
Down by Cartside, across the street from Cartside.
Something like that.
Little paint store.
Yeah, but it was something where like Tillamook and like Williams. Like and it was like the big warehouse space that had like 2 Resner heaters at each end, and it was like 40. It was like today, like where it's like 40 degrees. So it was like cold in there, and there was a lot of roadies that came in with their like little like cleats on, and like they like walked around this cold concrete floor for like 5 minutes, and then like immediately left because they were too cold because they were just wearing like, and that was a time where I'm just like. There would always be those phases in bikecraft where it's like, oh, there's 6 people making hats this year or something like that.
Right. And they should have stayed. They could have got a cool hat. Remember that era? There was a whole hat era in Portland.
That was about that. Yeah.
I think we had, so folks don't know, Bikecraft was this really cool like holiday gift bazaar marketplace fair thing that I started, I think in 2005 or 6 was the first one. Yeah. Did it for a bunch of years. Tried to give it to other people, sold it at one point. Anyway, I've regretted that it's not still happening because I think it'd be awesome and we should probably bring it back. But at one point, there were so many little cap makers in Portland making their own caps. We had like maybe 5 at one bike.
Yeah,
and they're all really good.
They were all really good. I mean,
there's Caroline. There was Sean Deller.
Sean Deller. Whatever happened to him?
I don't know.
Yeah, I know he like moved up to like Deer Island, and
he had almost like this little mini fame in Portland for his caps.
And he was like also like urban wilding and stuff like that too.
Yeah,
Then he moved up to like Deer Island, and
I think he got involved in like roadkill.
Possibly, yeah.
Right?
That seemed like
he did something around roadkill where it kind of like got him some attention. Anyway, Sean's hats were legendary. If anybody has a Deller cap, that would be something cool to add to the little informal museum that I'm trying to create here in the shed. Anyway, Bikecraft was really fun.
Yeah, I had a bunch of Deller hats. I don't have any more. I have a few Randy Joe caps. Randy Joe Fabrication down in Elkton, Oregon. So if anybody's looking for, I have my plug of like. Nice, and she does a lot of wool, and so bike caps, especially for the winter.
Okay, so what are some winter biking tips? What are some cold weather biking tips from Shawn Granton? I know you have some, and you're always very well prepared.
It's wool. Like
Yeah, just wool.
It comes down to a lot of wool, and I know some people don't like wool for various reasons. I mean, there's synthetics versions, but basically good base layers, like good socks of some sorts, layering. But it doesn't always have to be like super new tech stuff. Like it doesn't have to be like name brand puffy jackets. I'm not dissing them completely, but that's
completely.
like, completely. I mean, I have a puffy jacket of some sort somewhere that I pull out, but like sweaters, like just good sweaters that you can get Goodwill. Like I mean, I don't as much anymore, but I was definitely like a Goodwill and thrifting hound of like finding like especially like wool pants and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, just layering up a nice scarf, a good hat, good gloves, the extremities and stuff like that. I mean, I realize everybody's different. Like, so I'm talking about myself and what works for me, but I think it's definitely, worth checking out a few different things and playing around with it to figure out what goes on. And like, Portland has a very specific climate when it comes to winter. Like riding around today, we had the fog in the morning, but it's about 40 something degrees outside. Our winter is not like the winters I grew up in, where it was just a lot colder, snow, ice, and we do get a snow and ice event every once in a while, but it's more about rain. And I think that's why I love wool, is that I understand there's a point to rain jackets, like bike rain jackets. I've never really found one that I'm like, oh yeah, that one, like that I like. That there's always been some sort of issues with like fit or breathability. It's like the whole like breathability versus keeping the rain out, and like lamination, delamination. And I've definitely done like the bike rain capes, which is another way of going, which has
like the poncho style,
yeah, where it's that has its
I can see you like in a waxed poncho.
I had a like a lovely Carrot Ice wax.
There you go. See, Carrot Ice. That's
Carrot
the brand.
Ice, yes.
Yeah.
And even like synthetic, I still have like a synthetic like rain cape, big bright yellow, like visible for miles around type of thing. And like there's definitely benefits and there's definitely drawbacks. I think it's like one of those things that like like with the wool, like you have to like just play around with a bunch and figure out what works with you. But one of the things like why I like wool is that like we do get some good rain, and we did have some good rain a few weeks ago, but a lot of times it's just more of the like sort of drizzly to light, and wearing just like a good thick like wool sweater or wool jacket like keeps out a lot of that without having to like go to like a synthetic layer over the top of everything. Like I mean, I think probably the only thing that like I would say like is just try to like avoid cotton as much as possible. Like cotton equals death. Like,
and you have some credibility in this space because you do a lot of touring. You do a lot of multi-day touring. I'll say you're not one to necessarily go do the Great Divide Trail or something massive necessarily, but you've done quite a bit of touring. You actually do bike touring workshops, right?
I have. I mean,
so,
I haven't...
listen to what this guy's saying about prep. What are some of your favorite local spots to maybe do an overnighter or do a longer ramble?
I always love going out to the gorge. And I know that like it's not everybody's cup of tea, but like there's something pound for pound, like what do you get out of riding out to the gorge that it's hard to like get going elsewhere.
Like view, just adventure. There's some good paths to get out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the old highway, like the views. I mean, you're going to share it with cars, so that's always a drawback. And like they are expanding the actual trail part, but that's still a ways away. You still have to get through like the actual like road part to get to it.
So you like to go to like Ainsworth State Park?
Ainsworth. I love going to Ainsworth. It's just sort of my jam of like going out there when I'm just like, especially like when it reopens in mid-March and like the weather gets good enough, and especially like when daylight savings kicks back in, when you have the later sunset, like, there's something about having that extra light at the end of the day. And I know, as I say, like Ainsworth is not everybody's cup of tea because it is nearish to the freeway and the train tracks, and you'll hear like some noise, and it's not as pristine as like going to like another place. Like I would say the other great suggestion for like if somebody wanted to just do a sort of like starting it overnight and didn't really know is like go out to Stub Stewart, because that's a lot more bike path. Like, there's a little bit of getting out of Hillsborough. If you're taking the max, there's maybe a mile of like, urban suburban driving and biking. And then you're in the countryside for 10 miles. You stop at Banks, go to the Thriftway, get your supplies, maybe, go to one of the restaurants, get some food, and then the rest of it is just a bike path.
Yeah, that's hard to beat.
Yeah,
the Stubb Stewart off the Banks Vernonia Trail,
and it's definitely a lot quieter. So if you want to a more quiet overnight camping experience, and they have cabins too, which is another great thing. Cabins are at the top of the hill, so they're going to make you pay for it.
Those are hard to get to.
Hard to get to.
Yes,
and I've had
but worth it. It's like a little. It's like a little cul-de-sac community.
Yeah, and especially I always love going out to the cabins in the wintertime because it's I love the idea of camping, but I definitely don't really. I've done winter camping, but there's something nice about being out in the cold all day and then bringing all your gear and then ending up in a cabin. And the cabins at Stubb Stewart basically will provide you with bed, just the mattress. So you have to bring bedding, which is just usually sleeping bags, and a table and chairs, light, heat, power outlets, and then there's the bathroom over there. So it's you got to bring everything else, but it's just nice to be you're going to end up somewhere, especially if it did dump on you on the way up, that you can go and dry out in this nice warm cabin versus a tent where it's well, I guess I'm just going to get in my sleeping bag now and try to dry out that way without, my wet clothes on type of thing. But yeah.
And then bringing it back to Portland.
Yes.
You are, you're still creating.
Yes.
By the way, I still get your postcards, which is very cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how I ended up on, if that's for folks that are Patreons.
Oh yeah, I mean Patreons definitely get postcards,
which is very cool. So I recommend everybody sign up to Shawn's Patreon, get these really nice postcards so you can find out what stuff he's doing. And I want to have you plug your ride that's coming up. But back closer to here, you were doing something close to the shed today. You're back in school.
Yes,
Shawn Granton going back to school. What's that been like? What are you doing?
Today I was playing around with rocks.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you're doing
geography.
Yes. Oh, perfect.
But that was in a geology class, so yeah.
Nice. Geography, that fit, I feel like that fits you really well. So now that you'll be able to you can add that to your name on your shift ride, on your Pedalpalooza ride listings. It can say, I don't know, some kind of degree. So there you can be an even more, I don't know, qualified ride leader and whatever else may come with that.
And qualified, that's such a heavy term with this type of stuff because there unfortunately, I mean, there's a lot you can learn out of life and there's a lot that you can just do on your own. There's always this thing when I do these rides, and a lot of my rides will have some element of history, of the geography, talking about stuff. And, the first thing people will ask is where did you go to school? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what's your degree? And I would just be I didn't, and I don't have one. I just am interested in this stuff and went to the library, down to Central Library, and went to Historical Society. There's 3 places in town that would go to the library, Historical Society, and records down City, not City Hall anymore, but Portland City Records. And then just looking online and trying to find stuff that way. And I mean, that is one of the great things about the internet, is that this information is a lot more readily available. Back, say 30 years ago, you'd either hope that somebody wrote a book about what you were looking at, or just going down to the library and doing that stuff. I mean, there's still a value into that type of research, but it definitely, having this information much more accessible than it used to be, makes it a lot easier to do this type of stuff. And I mean, I enjoy when other people do these type of rides, and rides exploring the city or a place and stuff like that. But I guess it's just I wanted to see what I can do with a geography degree, what, not just with my own rides and stuff, but job stuff too.
Yeah. And selfishly, I'm glad you're doing geography because, as you just said, it does connect really well to stuff that I think of you as, people, places, urban environments, and wrinkles of history. And so selfishly, I'm glad you're doing geography and that you're not going to school to, I don't know, get an accounting degree so you can go work for some company or something. Nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying, hopefully you can still be leading cool rides, which leads me to, what's the ride you have coming up?
Well, I still have to actually technically put it on the shift calendar, but it is the Palm Tree Ride, and it will be, I believe, the last Sunday of February. So I'm going to be putting out the promotion pretty soon, within the next few days and stuff like that. And the Palm Tree Ride, you're saying how I've done rides for a long time, but the Palm Tree Ride this will be the 20th anniversary this year. I've been doing it since 2005. So there's a reason why I started doing the Palm Tree Ride. It's because I started seeing a bunch of palm trees in Portland, or noticing them. And when I moved to town, even like in 2001, and when I moved to town, like, as I said, like I didn't have a lot of like knowledge or preconceived notions of like what Portland looks like, but I was pretty sure that it wasn't going to involve palm trees of any sort, because this is the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
And so then when I started seeing them, and I was like, huh, what's going on here? Why palms? I thought they couldn't survive this climate. And then you started doing a little more research and reading, and realizing that, yeah, they can survive. Most of them are a specific species of palm that do well in this climate. But it also just got me thinking about what exactly is Portland's climate and geography. And there's this preconceived notion that, like, you know, it's supposed to be a bunch of, quote, pine trees, which Doug firs, but they're not pines. And then maybe some deciduous trees, and our weather is, you know, like continental, which it isn't. We're a marine climate. So right now, like, I don't know what the temperature is in like New England, but I'm sure I think when I looked last night, it was really cold out there. I mean, a lot of the country has been under quite a deep freeze, and we do get a freeze every once in a while, but we stay in the 40s to 50s during the winter as our highs, and it freezes occasionally, but often stays above freezing even in the middle of the night. So
warm enough for palm trees. Apparently.
Warm enough for a lot of things. And that's the thing, is like, there's also a bunch of other stuff. Like it's
not just all palm trees on your ride.
It's not just all palm trees. I mean, there's a lot of interesting, unique, exotic evergreen plants is what it's about.
Yeah, and I will always credit my knowledge of monkey puzzle trees to going on your palm tree ride many years ago. I never knew about them, and I was so fascinated when you shared about them.
Yeah,
and every time since then, it's become like, it's like my favorite thing I see, and I'm like, whoa, monkey puzzle.
Somebody else out there, I forget who it was, but they do like a monkey puzzle ride during Pedalpalooza, or like they
That's
used
right.
to.
Yeah.
Like,
they're very cool trees.
Yeah, they're very cool, very
So
interesting.
basically, for people that don't know, you'll stop at a really interesting tree that you've cataloged in your mind as you went by it, and you share about it.
Yeah.
And usually really interesting examples.
And yeah, basically talk about, like, I think one of the things that, like, interesting is with cities like Portland, as I said, like, and I'm not like discounting, like, there's definitely even people that are living here for a long time. But like, you know, people move to town and they have now they have more preconceived notions about what Portland is. Like, you know, especially like due to the fact that we gotten a lot of attention over the last 20 years, and there's that, you know, television series that comical television series that people, like, you know, once that got out, everybody thought Portland was exactly like that.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's still like one of those things that's hard to wrap your head around. Like, you've have this feeling like Portland should look a certain way with like its street trees and its aesthetic. And then you start breaking it down that, like, and I know some people get like a little pissy about palm trees. Like, I think there was one time, like, you did a post promoting one of the rides I did, and then there was a guy that's like, "Don't Californicate Oregon."
Oh,
like,
really?
Yeah.
Anti-palm tree. Okay.
Like, and it's like that sort of like palm trees equal California equal bad.
Right.
And so, but, you know, it's not as black and white as that. And you know, it's not always Californians doing it. And I know it's like the bogeyman, you know, like Californians, but like, but it's just also like most of the trees that we see in Portland, even if they're not palm trees or some weird trees, are not from here. Like, that's the thing. Like, most of our street trees that we, like, you know, that the city like approves and plants on parking strips generally come from east of the Rockies and like mostly east of the Mississippi River. Like, but, you know, nobody's going to bat an eye if you plant another, like, you know, like white oak, like, you know, an eastern white oak. You know, it just looks part of the thing, and it's like, but it isn't. It's not. These are not native trees, but like we've just sort of accepted that that's what this area is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And
so now, like, I know that your palm tree ride, there's a little shred of like, it's sort of political for you.
I mean, yes. Political, and
there's more to it than just wanting to see nice trees.
Well, you know,
you want to elevate the palm tree and stick it to everybody.
Not necessarily. Like,
I know.
I think the idea is that, like,
give it its due.
It's, you know, it's. I guess like the way to put it is that, like, the assumptions we make about place and like what really like built urban environment, especially in the United States, is like a lot of duplicating from the East, like in the Midwest. And, even here in the north, and I come from the east. So like so it's like when you move from like, say, Connecticut with like lots of like eastern white oaks being everywhere, it's a native species. And then they move here and you see them on the streets and you're like, oh, okay. Like, you don't think anything about it because like I grew up looking at these trees, but then I just realized that they're not native. They were introduced, they were brought here. So it's like, if you're just going to be like, well, these trees because they look weird, like we're going to make a big deal about these ones, but these ones because they don't look weird, we're going to be okay with them being here. Like, you should like think about that, like what that means, like, and what the aesthetic of the urban environment is.
Yeah, I agree for sure. That's what you're known for, the aesthetic of the urban environment.
The aesthetic of the urban
environment. That can almost
be
your little
yes
tagline thing. Okay, so Palm Tree Ride's coming. Did you say a date yet? Yes.
The last Sunday of February.
Last Sunday of February. Yeah. Look for it on the Shift calendar. And
probably
elsewhere.
Not the Shift list.
Or maybe a flyer or something else around town.
Maybe if I get... my life has gotten a lot more busy with stuff, but...
Not so much flyering anymore.
I used to love flyering. I mean, that was like a thing. And I think a lot of people... I mean, I saw somebody like actually doing stapling to like a telephone pole the other day.
It must have felt good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I didn't really do a lot of stapling to telephone poles, but like a lot of, just handing them out, putting small ones in bike shops and other places and stuff like that.
I saw one, I think it was off Southeast 12th just a few days ago. I saw, it was like Belmont and 12th maybe. I saw a pole with so many flyers on it. I felt like it should be like preserved as like a historic site or something. It literally had like 100 layers and it was like curling off the pole and it was all flyers. I almost think that someone's clearly keeping it just out of nostalgia.
I would guess that PGE doesn't like that, but
Yeah, but I love it. I love going around town, seeing your art, seeing like flyers, bike event flyers. It just adds so much richness and depth to like the bike scene here.
Well, I think there's like a certain value to this type of stuff that like can't be replicated on the internet. Like this, I mean, it's just my general like riding around town and like seeing different new things, and it doesn't have to be like amazing stuff. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh my god, like I gotta tell the whole world, like, or this is like the unique thing. But I was just like riding around yesterday and like went down a few streets I hadn't been down before. I'm like, oh, these houses are sort of interesting over here. Like there was somebody like off of Northeast Klickitat, like I want to say like 62nd, somebody put like this horse statue in their yard.
Okay.
Like it just like, life-sized horse statue.
Yeah.
And they have like a little sign on it that's like got mosaic and it says horse. Like you're just like
nice.
That just random like coming about stuff that like you're not just going to like find on the internet. And I think there's a value to like flyers and stuff like that like you might, because a lot of times like, especially with like the algorithm, like it's just it's just steering us in the direction that we've been going. So it's like, it doesn't throw in the curveballs. Like,
right.
Like, oh, here's something random. Like, it's just like, oh, you like this. So I'm just going to keep on like trying to like send you like, this is the algorithm talking, like trying to send you the same things, like more of that. Like, where it's just like, sometimes you'll go into a bike shop or whatever, and you'll see a flyer of some random event that like might not have been something you would have like even thought about. And you're like,
right.
Oh, what is this?
Yeah, like a bulletin board. Or like you said before about you're not the kind of person to like share a detailed cue sheet of your ride. And I think, part of it is like these days folks are so focused on whatever their GPS unit or their directions on their phone. They forget that sometimes just going off on a different route is when you actually see interesting things and new things and cool stuff. And so
I think the word here is like serendipity.
Serendipity,
And there's just something about like, and one of my philosophies is just like, especially like if you like have a bike ride, like, your commute to work every day, mix it up every once in a while. Like, oh, you go down this street. What about just going one block off today and seeing what's down there? Like sometimes you'll find some neat stuff. Sometimes you'll just like that route better, and that's like the thing is like, there's value in like using Google Maps to like give you a bike route somewhere and like following the prescribed, like
for safety or whatever,
safety and stuff like that. But like, especially like, I'm not saying like, and then just ride down Powell, like, type of thing. Like if that's the side street, like, I mean, I have my limits, but there's a lot of like neighborhood streets where it's just like, we've Peabody or whoever decided that like this is the bike boulevard / greenway / whatever street, but the street one block off is probably just as safe and quiet and peaceful and stuff like that, maybe just do that like every once in a while. Like, you might like it, you might not, but like you'll never know until you try.
Yeah. I think I read research one time that said they did a study on rats in it, and they gave them like the same route every time. Then they had some of them do random routes, every other time, and that they had like more brain cells. And I always think about that, like how obviously it's like a mental thing, right? If you do something new, you create new cells, and your brain is that much more, interconnected. So there you go. There's our plug for going out of your way, taking a different route, try a different, bridge or something than you usually take. And then you'll be in the sort of mode of urban adventuring and serendipity and stuff and like that. And then you got to look up Shawn's rides and do those, because you'll meet a lot of other people who love that kind of way of exploring the city.
Yeah. And I guess one other thing to impart before we go is just like, along with like trying a different route, is just like, feel free to stop. Like sometimes you see something interesting. And I know that a lot of times people either get focused on like, keep moving, like whatever, like, we gotta like keep on going, or you're late for work and stuff like that. And I get that, like, I've definitely been in that mode of like, gotta get there as fast as possible. But maybe tomorrow leave yourself 5 more minutes than you would have normally. It's just to like, if you saw something, like, to stop and check it out, because that's, there's a lot going on in the urban environment that, just you have to like pause and reflect and observe that. It's, if you're flying by, like, I mean, especially like driving, like anytime I'm in a car, it's like that's like the thing I like about biking and like on foot, that you could just stop and do this type of thing. And like, what is that? Where it's like in a car, it's like, what was that? And like, you're just like, well, I just got to remember for the next time I'm over here. Cause I mean, I can't turn around. I'm like, where's the parking? Where, like, how am I can't stop in the middle of the road and stuff like that. But like on a bike or on foot, you definitely can like do that type of thing. And that's like, use that benefit, use that to your advantage.
Yeah, I agree. And even after 25 years almost of doing that, there's still lots of interesting things to see in Portland, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's moments, I think, like at my most cynical, which usually doesn't happen that much, but like you get that, like, seen it all. Like, there's nothing new in this town. Like, I'm not just talking like new stuff, like, oh, there's another 5-story something over here that like people like to grouse about. Like, I'm talking about just like random stuff you might not have noticed before, like neighborhoods you really haven't explored. I mean, I think when I moved to town, people had this idea that Portland's a small town, but it really isn't. Like, not in space and area. Like, I mean, we're like 180 square miles and stuff like that. It's not LA big, but it's still quite a sizable city with a big footprint, a lot of different neighborhoods, a lot of different unique neighborhoods, especially like moving further into like, say, deep Southwest, where, anytime I'm out there, I try to explore as much as possible, because it's just an area that I never really had an excuse to go over there much. I didn't live out there. I was doing that a little bit, like when PCCA, like I had a class out in Sylvania, so I was like, when I went over there, I would try to do a little bit, like, okay, well, what's
exploring,
over here? Like,
yeah,
little exploring, because I had the excuse of being over there. So, but yeah, it's a big city, and there's a lot going on, a lot of different parts and stuff that you might just, if you're just focused on, you live here, grocery store here, bar here, work here, then you might not notice all these other things around it.
Well, Shawn, I'm glad that you're out there noticing, and I hope you keep sharing all of it with us and doing cool rides into the next 25 years at least. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thanks, Jonathan.
See ya.
See ya.